Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our chats with Emily, as we are calling our readings through the poetry of Emily Dickinson. We turn now in the Johnson edition to poem 385, Smiling Back from Coronation. Emily will use some version of smile in 44 of her poems. And in some regards, we're back to poem 356. You'll maybe remember this one. The day I was crowned was like the other days until the coronation came, and then 'twas otherwise, as carbon in the coal and carbon in the gem are one, and yet the former were dull for diadem. I rose and all was plain, and when the day declined, myself and it in majesty were equally adorned. The grace that I was chose to me surpassed the crown that was the witness for the grace. 'Twas even that 'twas mine. Now, in some ways, we're back to this question of recognition and publicity in her poetry. Our assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net, down that left-hand side, Chats with Emily, our playlist. I'm hopeful that you've already worked through our set of introductory comments. I'm hopeful that you've read our preceding 384 poems. We just finished with 384, No Rat Can Torture Me. And as we just noted, for example, with 356, this question of coronation, this question of being given some kind of precedence is going to be central to this poem. Now, I want you to notice that really this poem is just one long sentence, where the first 8 lines are the main clause and then lines 9 through 12 are the conditional clause. You'll see it when we read it. In some ways, we're back to Emily's struggle with the whole question of fame. Smiling back from coronation may be luxury on the heads that started with us, being's peasantry. Recognizing in procession ones we former knew, when ourselves were also dusty centuries ago. Had the triumph no conviction of how many be stimulated by the contrast unto misery. Now we'll come, of course, back to poem 376 with that use of the word misery. Notice we'll start though with the idea of smiling back from coronation. Again, poem 356 coronation we'll come back to. She says, smiling back from coronation may be luxury. Notice that it's almost as if she's not completely clear if it is in fact going to be luxury to be able to think about the possibility that she's been coronated, she's been understood, she's been accepted, she's been celebrated. On the heads that started with us, is she talking about other poets, other writers, possibly? Being's peasantry. Of course, we're thinking now about the ontological question, the idea of coronation versus the peasants, right? Recognizing, and I think that's the key word here, because that leads us to the possibility of recognition and fame. In procession, we're back to the coronation and the idea of the royal language. Ones we notice capitalized, former knew, when ourselves, also capitalized, were also dusty, in other words, maybe unknown. And then her hyperbolic language with centuries ago. In other words, we're all kind of in this writing project, this creative project together. She says, I wonder if I'm ever coronated, will that be everything I would hope that it would be? Notice she'll finish, had the triumph no conviction, here you can read it as if the triumph had no conviction, of how many be stimulated, notice we go from recognizing to stimulated, by the contrast unto misery. Now, you'll remember misery when we did 376, and you'll remember she says it this way, of course I prayed, and did God care? He cared as much as on the air a bird had stamped her foot and cried, give me my reason life I had not had, but for yourself 'twere better charity to leave me in the Adam's tomb, merry and naught and gay and numb, than this smart misery. Notice her use of the word misery. What's the point here at 3a? I think it's hard to know for creative attempts that is it actually worth all the energy expenditure? There's a bit of self-doubt possibly in a poem like this. If I were to be discovered, she asks, would that just be misery, or would that be the true coronation of everything I've longed for. At 2b, again, one long sentence, as we pointed out. Lines 1 through 8, the main clause. Lines 9 through 12, the conditional clause. And I think that's a good way to read it. At 3a, well, I cannot help but think of Keats's "When I have fears that I may cease to be, that on the shore of the wide world I stand alone and think till love and fame to nothingness do sink." He, of course, would have placed on his own tombstone, "Here lies one whose name was writ in water." Keats himself, convinced he'd never be remembered. It's possible that Emily plays the same game. Guys, when we get to poem 441, "This is my letter to the world that never wrote to me," she'll finish that poem by asking that we will judge tenderly of her. The idea of coronation is one of being celebrated, and yet I think the fact that she ends this poem with the word misery leads us to maybe wonder if she thinks it might not be that great if she were ever coronated. Finally, at 3b, what was a time when you wondered if you would be recognized, if you would be rewarded, if you would ever be coronated? Thank you.